Wonderful. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to you, Polly. Thank you for coming to join our meeting this evening. I'm just going to quickly whiz through the first bits of the meeting, then we'll be straight on to you. So thank you very much. Firstly, Laura, is there any apologies for absence?
I don't think there were.
Who is buffering up? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you, Bridget.
Yeah. So is there any apologies for absence? Did we get the answer to that? No?
Sorry, Chair, I seemed to freeze for a minute, but hopefully I'm back. No, there's no apologies for absence.
Thank you very much. It's almost impossible to ask for declarations of interest in the matter of the evening because I imagine that absolutely everybody is really
personal prejudicial, but yeah.
And has a vested interest in what's going on, but non-prejudicial. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Unless anybody wants to give another layer of interest, no. All right, lovely. Then we just must approve the minutes of our meeting, which was on the 22nd of September. If I could just get somebody to propose those for me. Thank you, Judy. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you so much, Ray. All right then, Polly. I know this is a really mad time for you, but on you go. We give you the floor and we're all going to listen intently to everything that you say. Thank you. It's all yours.
Polly, you're muted at the moment.
I do apologise. Sorry, just to check, how long do I have? Because I'll make sure I fit in accordingly.
That's a scary question. How long would you like? About 15 minutes or so?
That's absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect.
But something like that's brilliant. Thank you.
That's fine. Allow me to, if you don't mind, share my screen and then I shall take you all through. So can I confirm that people can see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So let me take you through some slides about the Kettering Hospital redevelopment, and then hopefully I'll finish in under 10 minutes, so there's time for some question and answers as well. So I'm not sure of how much people know, but there's back in September 2019, Kettering Hospital was lucky enough to be announced as one of the 40 new hospital projects, the HIP2 projects as they're kind of termed by Boris and our government. At the same time in October, almost at the same time, the Trust was also given £49 million towards a new A&E department on the site. They're actually slightly different pots of money, but we've got both at the moment, which is wonderful news. So we're very lucky to be given that. And back in October this year, if people will remember in the press, the Prime Minister confirmed that actually the money for the new hospitals would be there. So the announcement that we had back this time last year was just some money to allow us to develop the plans for the redevelopment, not actually any money to actually build it. But it has since been announced that we will get some money to actually build it. We think that might be around 350 million, but I'll come back to that towards the end. So back at the end of November, our Trust Board of Directors have agreed a really exciting plan now for the new hospital and what that looks like in terms of a new modern fit for purpose estate. And I'll take you through some of the pictures and what that looks like in a moment. So what have we been doing since the announcement last year? Well, in the NHS, there's never been, well, probably most of the public sector, there's not been a huge amount of doling out of any monies over recent years. So there's not many of us in the NHS that have got the experience of rebuilding whole-scale new hospitals. So the first thing we did at Kettering was to go out to the market and appoint a project team of very senior individuals that do have significant hospital rebuild experience, not just in the NHS, but internationally. We've got a really good team on board. I'm the executive director overseeing it. We've also been engaging quite extensively with stakeholders. We've run some numerous public engagement events. We've talked to our staff in multiple occasions about what they feel is the most important things for their patients and for their working environment. As I say, we've talked to the public, we've talked to our governors, we've talked to lots of special interest groups about the things that they find difficult accessing the hospital. So we did a lot of engagement with those kind of people. And really, we then started to have a look at what does the future look like in terms of healthcare for North Northamptonshire. So we've looked at the demographic and non-demographic population growths for the next 30 years and how that relates to the kind of size of the hospital that we will need for the future, and also the kind of services that we will need in that hospital. So our population, as people I'm sure probably know, is growing over and above the national average by a long way, both in Kettering and in Corby. So we've got much higher than average population growth. We've also got a very a higher than average elderly population growth, and a lot of that's very rural, and also younger families coming into a lot of the new housing builds that we've got. So you can see the graph on the right there, it is the current hospital beds. So we looked at all the beds that we would need. We're currently just over 600. And we said, well, if we were to do nothing, aside from what we do now, in 15 years' time, we would need over 1,000 beds. That's a huge amount of inpatient beds for a hospital for the population the size that we have. So we then worked with our local partners. We worked with our partners in the councils. We worked with our partners in the CCGs, and looked at different things that we could do working together in an integrated fashion. And we have, you may or may not have heard of the ICANN programme that's just been launched across the whole of the county, that looks to try and support patients to get care closer to home. So community care rather than having to access an A&E department. So our staff will work more in the community with GPs, with community care. And then we've mapped out the future impact that would need on our beds. So we did a very detailed piece of work on the future population needs. And let me show you now some of the pictures. I suppose the other key thing we had to establish fairly early on in this piece of work is, could we build a new hospital on the current hospital site whilst we are running an operational hospital? Clearly, it's quite difficult to do. I'm sure you're all local residents, so you'll know that we don't have a lot of empty space on the current hospital site. But that was a really key thing to establish early on. The reason being is that if we felt that we couldn't do that, and we proved that that was going to be an impossible thing to do, then we would have to look at different sites. We were aware there were different sites available to us, and I will come on to at the end the options that we looked at that does include moving to a greenfield site. But the approach that we took is, and this is in summary, I won't take you through each of these, but really our development control plan now for the site, at the moment our site is very spread out, and we've got a couple of story buildings. They have grown over the years, so we've got 2 fairly new buildings, but the rest age quite considerably back to over 100 years old. So what we've looked to do with this development control plan is consolidate our buildings. So bring in the clinical services that are currently spread out across the site into a few buildings in the centre of the site. So there'll be bigger buildings. But what that allows us to do is it means our clinical teams don't need to wander across the whole site to see patients. That means that patients will get access to care, to medical care faster. They'll get a faster diagnosis, which means that they'll then have less time spent in hospital and can get home faster. So it's better for our patients, it's better for our staff if we co-locate clinical services together. That's fundamentally what I'll show you in a moment. We've also looked at, acute hospital care is expanded. We've recognised now in the NHS that it's really important to have access to green spaces, to have access to health and wellbeing spaces, healing gardens, dementia gardens, some of those things, both for our patients and for our staff. So we've looked at a design that helps to bring in a lot more natural light into the buildings, a lot more green spaces that will just make it a nicer place for our patients and for our staff to be. And of course, we've also looked at how patients and our staff get access onto the site. We know that access is currently very difficult. We've got a couple of car parks, but generally not enough car parking space. Because our buildings are spread out, sometimes where you park and where you want to go, where you need to get to for your clinical care is a long way. And that's really difficult for some of our patients. So we've had a really good look and are continuing to look at making sure that we improve the access into the hospital buildings. So this is the current hospital site. You can see on the right-hand side of this picture is the Rothwell Road. So the A14 is at the top there on the right, and Rothwell Road going down the hill into Kettering town. And you can see as I was saying, the wide spread out buildings that we have across the site. This is the vision of the future of the hospital site. So the picture is geographically the same. However, you can see the purple there is the access onto the site is a lot more improved. That will be drop-off areas for patients, drop-off areas for public transport, and I'll take you through how we're going to do this development as I go on. This is what it will look like in the end. So the bottom picture there, which says site entry, that will be looking from the Rothwell Road into the hospital site. So you can see some big phase developments there. The first one will be on the right-hand side, and that's our urgent care facility, which you can see a closer up image of at the other diagram. So that's what the hospital site will look like in the future. And I'll take you through some of these. On this picture, you've got Rothwell Road now at the top of the site, and the two buildings I referenced earlier, which are our newest buildings, they're built within the last 10 years, and some of you may know them. That's the treatment centre and the foundation wing, which holds our paediatric wards, our ITU facilities, and our cardiology facilities. So on the image there, they are in dark grey, and they are the only buildings we plan to keep on the current hospital site. This is the first phase of our development, phase 1, and this is the urgent care facility that I referenced in the picture earlier I showed you. This will be a 6-storey building. We will need to demolish some office space in order to build that, but we're just working up the plans for that at the moment. So it's a 6-storey building. It will have an A&E on the ground floor, working with GPs and with community partners, mental health and others, to make sure that isn't just a hospital A&E. A lot of our patients now need much wider spread of care than a traditional hospital A&E department. They do need mental health facilities. They do need significant dementia support, paediatric A&E. So that's a state-of-the-art building. On the floors above, you'll then have short stay wards to enable patients to get access to assessment areas and short stay areas without having to go into the main hospital wards, and you'll then have some medical wards above that. So that's phase 1. At the moment, our plan is to start building that in 2022, and that plans to be open in 2023, 2024, depending on planning. What that enables us to do, in blue there, number 16, is our current A&E department. So once we've built that and we've moved our services in there, it enables us to demolish our current A&E department. At the bottom of the site, which in terms of the bottom of the hill, which is the right-hand side of this, you'll also see an additional smaller grey building, and that's a new energy centre. So at the moment, the hospital is solely reliant on temporary energy facilities, temporary boiler plants, and you've probably seen some images of those in the press. That's not the way we want to be. We want to be a sustainable hospital. We want to start delivering carbon sustainability and net carbon zero. So that energy centre is part of our sustainability plan going forward. So this then is phase 2. So this is our second building there, your second big building. It's another 6-storey building, and we've been able to build that because we've knocked down the old A&E department. So that inside there will be in the main operating theatres, so a brand new suite of operating theatres. We'll have a new mortuary facility, some pathology, another 6 wards, and really by this point we start to replace up to 70% of our inpatient beds just by building these 2 buildings, which means that for 70% of our patients, they are getting care in a new environment, in a state-of-the-art facility, rather than in the buildings that are 100 years old that we have now. And again, once we've built that, you can see outlined in blue there, the buildings will then be able to demolish because we would have moved the clinical services into that other building. This then becomes phase 3 of our redevelopment, and this really finishes off the main part of our all of our medical and surgical facilities. So nearly all of our beds there are replaced. And we you can see some of the green space starts to arrive here. And then you can see in our final stages, we start to get much more of that green campus idea, that natural light coming in, and that health and well-being. By the time we get by the time we get to the end, we have been talking with Northamptonshire Healthcare, with GP premises and others to think what else we might want on the hospital site. What do our patients need? So the kind of things we've been talking about only earlier today is there is planned to be a shortage of specialist palliative care end of life beds in the north of Northamptonshire with our growing population. We also need to replace a lot of the community beds that's not run by the hospital, they're run by a different organisation, but some of them at Isbrook, at Corby campus, are getting quite old in terms of the estate. So the kind of things we're talking about is actually, can we bring some of those facilities onto the site so that some of our population can really access seamless care all in one place. So in terms of the process our board went through, I won't take you through the detail of this, but there is a very rigorous process that HM Treasury force all public sector investments to go through. It's called the 5-case business case model. It's not set by us. There is a process that we need to follow to look at the long list of options and then to score them against a short list, score them against some critical success factors and develop a short list. And we did that, and this is the process that we followed. So the long list of options there surrounded by the red range from business as usual, we don't do any development whatsoever, to those 5 phases that I've just taken you through. And you can see phase 6 there is a full rebuild on a greenfield site. So that was on our long list. We assessed that as much as we assessed any of these other phases of development. We went through a very rigorous session, included all of our board, it included our governors who represent the public, and it included our non-exec as well as our executive directors. And this is the summary of the 6 different options, and I'm going to take you to a few different things on there. So on the second row down, one of the key things the appraisal panel looked at is the percentage of the estate that would be in a good condition with each of these phases. So good condition in the NHS is classed as condition A or B. And you can see at the moment only 20% of our estate at Kettering is classed to be in a good condition. And you can see there as we go through phase 1 we get to 43%, for phase 2 76%, and so on until we get up to 100%, which is our option, either do 5 or our greenfield site. But really we need, so that's obviously where we would like to be, is get as much of the estate in the good condition that we can. However, we also have to balance that off with the finances. So let me take you through to those rows in bold at the bottom. So you can see phase 1, which was our urgent care hub, £250 million that's going to cost to build. By the time we get to phase 2, that increases to 532 million, 765, and you go up like that. Now, that's key for 2 reasons. First of which is the availability of capital that HM Treasury has. As I said at the beginning, we've been provisionally told that we've probably got somewhere in the range of 350 million. We may be able to get slightly more than that, but by the time we start to get to the high levels of the phases, and you can see there £1 billion, 1.3 billion pounds, it's very unlikely that HM Treasury will be able to give us that value of money. The reason why the greenfield site is 1.3 billion as opposed to just the 1 million for phase 5 is that, first of all, we can't keep the treatment centre and the foundation wing. We would need to rebuild those as well as all the other buildings. Second of all is that we would have a site that has no electricity on it, no water, no roads going to it, those kind of things. So we would need to rebuild all of those as well, which is why that's increased in money over and above the phase 5. The other key thing we considered was that we have to, capital when it comes to the NHS isn't free. We need to pay charges back on it every year. So the second to bottom line there is the charges that HM Treasury charge us every year that we would need to pay back to the government. So let me take you to a greenfield site at the far right. If we were to, by any chance, get the 1.3 billion to rebuild the hospital entirely somewhere else, we would have to find £64 million a year to pay back to the government. Now, just to put that into some kind of perspective, what the appraisal panel then considered was we would have a lovely, big, shiny, beautiful building, and we wouldn't be able to afford to put any staff in it. We wouldn't be able to run proper clinical services out of it because we just couldn't afford to pay that back. So those were the key things that we considered as part of the decision. And you can see here down on the left-hand side is those 6 long list options and the critical success factors that the board considered. So the board decided in the end that it could not progress with a short list to look at a full rebuild on a greenfield site or to look at option 5. First of all, because the capital doesn't exist and it would take us so long to argue the case with the government that our patients would just for the next 10 or 20 years have to keep on using the buildings that we've got, and we didn't think that was fair on our patients. So that was the key reason. Clearly, we also didn't want to do a business as usual. So we shortlisted those 4 options in the middle, with a preferred option of option 3, which is getting us, if you recall, to about 83% of our hospital buildings being new. Now, just to explain, that does not mean we will not be going to a full hospital rebuild in the future. We will. It's just in this capital spending review, in this spending round, that is what we're going to ask for. But we have absolutely every intention of asking for more as future capital rounds in future years become available. So this slide just sets out very small images of the ones that I've already shown you, but phase 3 being our preferred option there that we're going with. In terms of timeframes, our strategic outline case that we're completing at the moment for the money needs to be in February, so it will be going to our board for final approval in February. We will then have to move on to an outline business case where we will test all of these again, and we will then move on to full business case. So it's quite a lengthy process that HM Treasury insists that we follow through, and that's just to make sure all due diligence has been had. So as we move towards outline business case now, we are going to start wider engagement with our patients, because we'll actually now start to do the physical design of the wards, what matters to our patients, the design of the spaces, where services need to go, where car parking needs to go, etc. So now we've got the shortlist, we'll start to engage much more widely in 2021 on those. So in terms of our next steps, once we've submitted this document, is absolutely to move forward with phase 1. So that's our urgent care hub and the wards above it. So we will be submitting further cases and further, we've been talking to the Department of Health, we've talked to HM Treasury and NHS England already over the last few weeks to try and get permission to move ahead now with phase 1. Our A&E department on the hospital site is the biggest concern that we have. It was built back in 1993 for half the number of patients that we currently see in it. For those that access care there, it lacks natural light, it's very cramped, our staff have a very difficult environment to work in. It's more staff than it should to be able to deliver that. So that's our priority for our redevelopment, and that's what we will be moving ahead with. And that's the end of the slides and the end of the images I was going to show you, and I'll open it up for some questions. If that's okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's just exactly brilliant what we wanted to hear, and it looks so exciting and it's wonderful. And I just used Kettering General Hospital because I broke my wrist, and already it's amazing. The way that you're looked after is fantastic. So it's very exciting, all of it.
I'm glad to hear.
I'm going to put you onto a list, everybody. So if you would like to ask any questions, then there you go. There's Judy. Judy, I'm going to go for ladies first, and then you're afterwards, Erin.
Thank you, Chair. Polly, fantastic presentation. It looks really, really exciting. Just about tried to keep up. Is there any chance we could have a copy of the presentation? That would be brilliant. I've been frantically trying to screenshot and save it into Word, and I just lost it at one point.
Yes, of course. It went into the public domain at our board session, so that's not a problem at all. I'll make sure I get it over to you.
That would be brilliant. I've just got one question, and I'm sorry if I've missed this because I couldn't read it all quite at the same time. You're wanting to be self-sufficient energy-wise is brilliant. I just wondered what particular environmental things you'd put into the plan. And again, I'm sorry if I've missed this, but solar energy, heat pumps, rainwater harvesting, is your energy going to be biomass driven? What's the eco plan? Are there any sort of bio roofs involved? Any extra tree planting? What's the plan?
So we're currently working up the plan, and we'll be doing that for our outline business case. So funnily enough, coming to you tonight, what I am missing is another meeting that's going on, which is a public meeting about sustainable travel. So we'll be doing, so we've just launched a process to agree a sustainable travel plan. We've been working with local partners on that because what we don't want to do is build, build lots of car parks that encourage everybody to drive to site. We need to find better ways of treating our patients. And of course, with the current pandemic going on, a lot of appointments where people were having to come to the hospital site are now being done virtually, and likewise with GP practices. And that's worked in a lot of cases, not always. And then, so we need to find the right balance for that. But we are looking to a range of things. So there's things about travel. We've signed up to trying to be now avoid any single-use plastics. There's a lot of things with medical care and the way instruments are delivered to us, and lots of other things that are all single-use plastics that we have now signed a commitment to try and get rid of those. Absolutely about planting trees in natural spaces and doing all those kind of things. So there's a whole stream of work, and we've been started work with Northampton Hospital to align that as well. But it's not there. It's not there yet, if I'm honest. So we'll be working on that over the next 6 months. And if there's any of you as individuals who are keen to be involved with any of that, then you'd be more than welcome.
Yeah, I'll get involved with that. Thank
Brilliant.
you.
Let's go Owen, then Kevin.
Thank you. I'm speaking as a grumpy old ex-surgeon at the hospital who's seen multiple developments on the site over my time there. So bear with me. I'm sorry. I've got about 4 or 5 points I want to raise. The first one is about 15 years ago or so ago, there was rationalisation of services moving vascular to Northampton and cardiac to Kettering. And we've still got the thorny issue of maternity services and provision of neonatal care, which is obviously, we've seen what's happened elsewhere in the country. And I wasn't quite sure whether you were working with Northampton to withdraw from these rationalisation of services and have them all on one site, or whether you're going to continue that arrangement with Northampton, because there was nothing mentioned about that at all. Also, major trauma in the county didn't seem to come out in the presentation as well. I have got some other questions, but I don't know whether you want to answer them all individually. Some of them are quite quick. The first one,
give them all to me then.
Right. The first one is when we developed the treatment centre, and I was very much part of that treatment centre. It was designated as something that could not be invaded by people who were coming in for emergency care. So it was the first step to organising a separation of emergencies versus elective care, which meant you didn't have the cancellations, which is a very inefficient way of doing it. And I don't know whether this came out, whether you were going to actually preserve that, whether you were going to have Davison Towers or Barrington Towers, which would be a separate, non-invasive building, which would just be for elective surgery and not to be used for emergency surgery. Obviously, unless you've got a major vascular or an aircraft landing on a train or something. I heard no mention at all about the education centre. Now, I was a programme director for the Foundation School, and that's a very important part of the staffing you've got at Kettering, because if you don't have junior staff here from Leicester, you don't provide them with an adequate education centre, and I'm sure you know, you just won't be able to run the hospital. And I didn't hear where that was going to come in, because that's part of the bits you were going to demolish. Anyway, so that's the other thing was when you're demolishing the A&E department, that actually also houses the outpatient department. But I wasn't quite sure whether what happened to that. Did that go into the, all these sort of things and so on and so forth. The other thing is the buildings on the front, which front onto Rothwell Road, I thought they're Edwardian, some of them are Victorian. Are they listed in any way, shape or form? Well, you're very lucky then, aren't you? And my final question is the local care centre. And as this is speaking on behalf of the people of Corby, they really value the local care centre that we've got on the site here in Corby. Is that still going to be withdrawn, which means everybody in Corby will have to go to the centre to get treatment? Because I think these local care centres are actually really, really relished by the consumer, the patients.
Okay,
Sorry,
so
I will stop there.
No, that's fine. They're all really, really good questions and very apt questions. Let me kind of try and answer them all. So Northampton and Kettering, as you may know, have recently come together in a group management model. So we have one chief exec, we have one chair now, we have one group people officer. And at the moment, in fact, even today, we were interviewing for a group digital director, a head of IT and digital. So the hospitals are absolutely working together in collaboration, and we will work even closer together in collaboration going forward. However, we are a very long county, aren't we, Northamptonshire? And we have high population growth in Kettering and Corby, and we have high population growth almost directly the opposite end of the county. So we have committed in public that there is no case for a single acute hospital in the county, because no matter where you put it, patients will get disadvantaged if you put it somewhere in the middle of the county. So there will absolutely still be an acute hospital in Northampton. There will still absolutely be an acute hospital in the north of the county. There has also been commitment that those hospitals will have fully functioning A&E departments. They will have maternity services, they will have paediatric services, they will have an acute medical and surgical take. So those things are agreed. Now, what we are going to be doing, Councillor, is working with both medical directors, and I'm leading this work with them, is doing a joint group clinical strategy. So Kettering and Northampton, as well as many other district general hospitals, have unsustainable clinical services. We have very small workforce, perhaps one consultant, maybe two in some services, as do Northampton. That doesn't bode well for, obviously, for sustainability. If that workforce goes off sick or they go on holiday, patients have to wait longer. So what we are looking to do is, where we do have sustainability issues across the site, is bringing that workforce together. That doesn't necessarily mean it will be on one site or another site. It might be one workforce working across two sites, but covering each other. So that clinical strategy doesn't form part of this work per se, but we are starting it literally in February, and we'll be looking to get that joint clinical strategy done by the summer of next year, so that as we move forward into the more detailed design for the Kettering Hospital site, we will know what size of hospital site we need, whether or not we need rooms for this, a smaller service over here, or whether or not we're doing that somehow differently. So you're absolutely right. I didn't mention it because it doesn't particularly it feeds into this, but it will feed into the next stage of this as opposed to this stage. In terms of emergency and elective, you're absolutely right. In terms of the treatment centre, that has worked very well. I think some of the lessons that the NHS as a whole has learned over the last 6 months in terms of the pandemic is that by keeping electives and emergencies separate, you can protect some of your elective or more of your elective work than you would do otherwise. We know that anyway from working in a hospital, but it's not become, it's become even more obvious that that is the way forward. So we will be looking to try and protect emergency and elective routes and different buildings on the site. What that also allows, for example, at the moment in the treatment centre, we have, it's COVID secure. So patients are screened for their elective operation as long as they are negative, and we screen all of our staff working in there repeatedly. Then they can come in and be protected and safe without having patients that haven't been screened. The patients that haven't been screened come through our main entrance through A&E and that way. So absolutely, we will be looking to do that because that's part of protecting us in a pandemic world. In terms of the education centre, you're absolutely right. PWIC, we call it, Prince William Education Centre. So absolutely, it's key. At our last board meeting, you might want to go and have a look at the papers. We have just done a joint academic strategy with Northampton to become a university teaching hospitals in Northampton. So the education and the research and the training is absolutely top of our agenda to make sure that we have the space and the facilities even more than we have now to help support that in the future. And in terms of your final point, wasn't sure, did you mean Corby Urgent Care Centre or did you mean the Willowbrook campus as a whole? I wasn't sure. I presume you meant the Urgent Care Centre.
That specifically, but the Willowbrook complex does also house other things,
Yep.
not just GP things. There's
Yeah.
other outpatient facilities there.
Absolutely, we run quite a few services out of the Willowbrook campus, and we it's certainly our intention to continue to do so. We absolutely don't want to be in a position where we run services at Nen Park, down in Wellingborough, out in Corby. We want to continue doing that, and we want to do more of that rather than less of that. There is no reason that we need patients and staff all coming into one site if they can safely be treated out on other sites. So absolutely we'll be continuing to do that, and we are already working to try and get more work out there rather than less. In terms of the Corby Urgent Care Centre in particular, obviously that's not run by the hospital, that's and it's commissioned by the CCG, so we didn't have a lot to do or anything to do with the consultation that took place. But I can tell you that we are not aware of any plans whatsoever to shut that down, and we wouldn't want it to be, because we couldn't to absorb that number of patients all coming to Kettering. So we would fully support that remaining open out there.
My only question is, if you couldn't fully absorb it, you have to accept the fact that somebody else might just close it, in which case you'd have to. So having a little bit of space rather than trying to fill everything that you've got is a bit of forward planning. Well, I'm sure you are a forward planner, obviously, but leaving space for growth.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Owen. We've got the right man for the job this evening. Kev, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, I've got a couple. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. Number one, extremely disappointed this isn't being rebuilt in Corby. No? After all, everybody wants a hospital in Corby. Two, any plans for free parking? Or I mean, I don't actually visit the hospital that often, but is there a process for the people who visit the hospital often? With do they get reimbursed their parking, because the charges can be quite excessive?
Yeah, so well, I'll answer both of those. So in terms of the parking, yes, we have, as do most hospitals, I think, if not all, processes and systems in place that for those that have to come to the hospital regularly and frequently, or patients or visitors that are parents, for example, of children that are in and they're having to come repeatedly, we do have concessionary parking available for that. We will be, as part of the travel plan that I mentioned earlier, be looking at parking charges and parking as a whole as part of that programme of work. And in terms of building the hospital in Corby, as I mentioned, we did look at different greenfield sites, and absolutely, we looked at Corby. However, it was discounted from the long list, not Corby per se, but any greenfield site, just because as I said, the capital cost, it would cost at least 1.3 billion, if not more, and that's not even buying the land. And we would have to pay back so much money every year that we wouldn't have the staff to staff it. Could we have two hospitals that are open? There is not enough medical staff or nursing staff in the NHS to be able to staff other second hospitals, second A&E departments. We already struggle nationally to recruit into those roles.
Okay. So my other one, I'm very pleased to hear that Kettering and Northampton are joining up. I had an experience with a relative who was in hospital in Kettering and then came back to Corby and then visited the doctors. And when the doctor wanted some test results and had to ring reception at Northampton General Hospital to get put through to the department to find out the test results, and those results weren't automatically updated onto that person's patient record so that they could be reviewed immediately. So that was hopefully those kind of things won't happen in the future. It will be more integrated. Another thing leading on IT front is as we're all doing these meetings on Zoom, perhaps will the NHS be looking at offering, not particularly Kettering, alternative ways of seeing doctors that don't involve travel? We're talking green. If it's safe to have a video conference meeting rather than a travel meeting. So lastly, hopefully this is going to drive through. It's going to perhaps deliver some savings within the hospital. and that those savings would be reinvested into the clinical care side of things, or is this just to make it nicer?
So fundamentally, it is not about savings at all. It is about being able to deliver care in a good and safe and high quality environment for our patients, and being able to have enough space and buildings to be able to meet the future population demands and the future population needs of our local population. It's not about saving money in the slightest. There will be no doubt some efficiencies, as I mentioned earlier, that come out of co-locating clinical services together. And for example, one of the other ways we will see savings of money, if you like, is currently we spend quite a lot of money every year on maintaining our old buildings, maintaining our old pipework and all that kind of thing. We won't obviously have to spend that if we've got brand new buildings. So there are some financial benefits, yes, but that is absolutely not the driver for this. And those will get reinvested. They're not going anywhere else. They're not going into in terms of the other 2 points you raised, absolutely digital IT across the 2 acute hospitals. As I mentioned earlier, today was the interview process. I don't even know who's been appointed as yet for the Chief Digital Information Officer. Their key role will be to bring together the clinical systems across the 2 acute hospitals, but also linking with primary care and community care, so that everybody can start to see results and electronic patient records. We'll get away from those big volume patient notes that our medical teams have to deal with. And we've already launched electronic patient records at Kettering. We'll be launching it at Northampton, and it will be the same one, so that our clinicians can start to see, and they're very keen, and all the clinicians are absolutely leading the drive on that. In terms of the video consultations, absolutely. So in March, when COVID struck, I think we've delivered, this statistic is about 50%, I think, of our outpatient appointments have been done virtually since March. It's a huge volume. Now, not all of that is ideal, because there are some times that you can do, our consultants say you can do on Skype or however else on Zoom, a video consultation, and that might be okay once. But actually, by the time you get to the follow-up appointment, you do actually need to physically see that patient. So there's a bit of a balance that we need to find, and we're just working through with our clinical teams exactly what that is. But there is absolutely a drive not to return to the old ways of every patient having to come to site and be physically seen for every appointment. So again, our clinical teams are absolutely behind the drive on that as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I just have one question, because I don't understand. If the government gives you money and you also have to pay money back, how do you generate the money that you have to pay back if you're a hospital?
So, well, you could generate it in different ways. You could, some of the financial efficiencies I talked about, you could deliver it through that way. We could offer local private hospital space on site. We could rent out retail space in our main entrance to, we could have Costa Coffee. We've already got Costa Coffee, but you can offer retail space out, those kind of things. So there's a whole variety of different ways that we can find that. But don't get me wrong, it's going to be difficult, which is why the panel discussed it for some time as to what was a realistic amount that we could pay back without affecting patient care.
Okay, thank you. Anybody, on you go, Anthony.
Well, thank you. Yeah, this question has kind of already been answered, but I'll mention it anyway, because there might be a bit more that you want to say. But anyway, thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting and exciting. I quite often get complaints of people saying, we want a hospital in Corby. I know you've already covered that, and logistically, as you said, there wouldn't be enough A&E staff to be able to do that and so on. But could we, what is the scope for having, rather than a big hospital in Kettering, perhaps smaller hospitals in Corby and Wellingborough that could deal with certain things? And I know cost is a factor, and I think you probably already answered that, but maybe there's more detail you'd like to give to that. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So there are some services that the hospital can deliver off the main hospital site. So outpatients, in a lot of examples, doesn't need to be on a main hospital site. We could do that at Wellingborough or at Corby, as you say. There are other things, blood taking, I'm trying to think, some of our x-rays and diagnostics. So there are quite a few things we do, that physiotherapy, that can be delivered elsewhere. But a lot of, for example, our surgery and other things need to be on close to where we have an ITU, close, because if things go wrong, close to where we have inpatient beds, close to where we have our A&E staff, our emergency staff. So there are a whole range of treatments you couldn't do without those facilities. But there are some. One of the things I've been talking about is moving perhaps some of our eye injections. So eye injections are something that we currently do on the current hospital site, and some of those patients need to come very regularly and very often for those injections. And those laser treatments, one of the things we're looking at exploring at the moment is, do we need to do those on the hospital site? Can we start to move some things like that out to the Corby campus, down to the Wellingborough campus or Nen Park, so that we can... So more and more modern healthcare is trying to move away from everything being done in a big traditional hospital and more into community settings. So we have been working with our community partners, and I think as medical advancements happen, more will probably get more, available to be done, because there's less risk of patients deteriorating and needing an emergency service. But there is only a limit, I suppose, in answer to the question.
Thank you.
Owen, I'm sure, wants to come in with his expertise.
Yeah, the other thing I forgot to mention was when we were talking about, Davison Towers or Barrington Towers as the acute unit for elective surgery, there was a third phase that was in discussion at that time, which was a homeward bound unit. So it's people who aren't then sitting in acute medical beds or acute surgical beds, who just need 3 or 4 days extra time in a hotel type facility, with not a high lot of nurses around, but access to the local hospital in case something goes wrong. I didn't see any mention of that. Has that sort of gone out of favour completely?
No, not at all. In fact, it's very much in favour. So I was referring to it, although I didn't mention it by name, in kind of the later stages of the development, when I was talking about more of a campus approach. So absolutely, we now call them step up and step down beds. So step up beds being patients who are at home or in care homes who require a little bit more intensive support to stop them deteriorating, but don't need to go and sit in an A&E department or don't need an acute hospital. But that's what we call step up beds. So basically they're to avoid somebody deteriorating so badly that they need A&E, but they need a little bit more support. There's then the step down beds, which is what you just referred to, Councillor, which are those patients who don't need acute medical treatment anymore, but they just, as you say, need an extra 2 or 3 days just to make sure that they're back on their feet again and able to go back home safely. So we are absolutely working with Northamptonshire Healthcare Trust to have a look at the future needs and what numbers of beds we would need. And there's a variety of, we could do them on the current hospital, we could do them on as part of this development, or we could look to do them at the Willowbrook campus, for example, the community beds you have out there, changing some of the use so that they become more step up, step down beds. There's also some beds down at Isbrook so we're looking at a range of different options, but absolutely that's still on the table and something we all still very much want to do.
Fantastic, thank you. Has anybody got any other questions for Polly? No? Well, Polly, thank you so much for coming to see us. It's really just exciting and fantastic, and I really, really hope it all comes to fruition.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's really lovely. Thank you ever so much, and I hope we haven't kept you from some much more exciting and interesting meeting.
No, not at all. Thank you. Nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Bye, Polly.
Bye.
Wowee! Fantastic. Right,
Chairman, can I thank you for letting me sound off about some of those little pet projects I have, but hopefully it made sense for everybody. Thank you very much.
Is it the Owen Davidson building?
Well, no, it was. I was joking about that.
Oh, I see. I didn't know if you were really joking or if it was the truth. I think they should have anyway.
It did go through consultation, but didn't get beyond it.
Consultation at home over breakfast, yeah?
No.
All right. The last point on the minutes of the evening is the forward plan. Does anybody have anything in these strangely forward planning moments of our time? I do not. If nobody else does. No? Okay.
Nothing about unitary there.
Well, that's a question for, I think the question of the age is to do with unitary and to do with elections and, well, to do with everything about unitary. Is there anything coming forward on that, Laura, do you know?
I'm not really sure, to be honest. I mean, obviously they have their own, shadow council and meetings process in place. So I'm not sure what there is for us to actually do on that front. Don't know whether Jonathan can throw any light on that.
Judy's got her hand up. Judy?
Well, do you want to come in first, Jonathan? I just had a thought, but feel free to say something.
Yeah, I was only going to just confirm what Laura said in terms of the Shadow Council considering unitary, the budget process that's going through at the moment. So I suppose the focus for this group is more on Corby Council than anything that you want to consider in the last few months.
Yes, Judy?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to say is, yes, as Jonathan points out, there's a whole budget thing going through. Mark Pengelly is heading up the Shadow Authority Scrutiny Group. Might be worth talking to Mark. But the other thing I personally would like to see looked at from a Corby standpoint while we still have the chance, and I'm sorry if you're going to cringe at this, Jonathan, but the I can't remember what it's called. Sorry, it's been a manic day. The whole revamp of the council tax. I really want to see a fund put aside to help people who are really going to be affected and struggle with a huge hike from whatever it is now to like 4.5%. There's going to be a lot of people in Corby who aren't going to be able to afford it, who are going to get real difficulties, especially those on benefits. I'm not quite sure what we can do about it, but yeah. And if you've got any ideas, Jonathan, on that, please chip in, because it really concerns me. I do a lot of emotional support work at the moment with people in Corby, and there's people in real crisis.
Chair, are you happy for me to come back on that? I mean,
yes, please.
Yeah, I suppose that consultation still out at the moment in terms of the council tax support scheme, or is it just finished? I think it's just finished, hasn't it?
Yeah, finished on the 30th of November, Jonathan.
Yeah, no, I think it's, given that the changes will come into place post vesting day, there's a limited amount that we can do as a sovereign council to change that in terms of how that will impact. I will give it some thought in terms of whether there's anything we can consider over the next few months, but I think given that the policy and the budget arrangements and how that's phased in will be down to the Shadow Council, apart from making representations, which we could do. It's almost out of our hands in terms of that process.
Yes, Judy, go ahead.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back? Jonathan, is there any scope for, I know Corby's got a pot of money, and that when we go unitary, it's all going to go over to unitary, basically. Can we spend any of that now by putting that into a hardship fund for people who are going to be affected by this council tax hike, or is that a really naive suggestion?
I wouldn't have got a naive suggestion. I think it's something I'll take away, and if I come back to you, direct Councillor Kane.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I appreciate that.
It is an interesting question. Does anybody have anything else? No? All right, well, I think that's a fantastic meeting. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Paul. I'm going to say good night to you all, and I'll see you all soon. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Bye. See you
Bye.
tomorrow.
Bye.